Hello everyone, my name is Oscar Molina Romualdo. I'm currently a student at BMCC taking Business 200. Today I'll be discussing some ideologies and beliefs from Henry Mintzberg and Peter Drucker that both played a role in business organization, both in the past and the present. I will begin with discussing about Peter Drucker and a little bit about him, and then discussing his ideologies and what he really focused his career on. To begin, I'll be giving you a small introduction who Peter Drucker was. Peter Drucker, or full name Peter Ferdinand Drucker, was born on November 19th, 1909 in Vienna, Austria. He was an Austrian-born American management consultant, educator, author, whose writings really contributed in the everyday business organization and management styles of the modern day. He was also a leader in the development of management and education, and a forerunner in the concepts known as management by objectives. As seen in a Business Weekly magazine, before his death in 2005, he was claimed as the man who created business management. Although he did play a really big role in corporate America, or even so corporate business, he really focused on the idea that he wanted to create a functioning society rather than a business type of society, but emphasized that through set structures and guidelines and these types of approaches that he believed in, he would be able to aid that creation of a functioning society. And I think this really is seen through his experiences of the crumbling of societies through the reign of Nazi Germany and the aftermath of the Great Depression following the war. Although oftentimes he shunned the idea of becoming a consultant, he definitely emphasized and played a big role in consulting for large corporations and government agencies and nonprofit organizations, and by aiding them in developing and implementing different guidelines and ideologies that he imposed and developed through his different experiences. One of the most well-known ideologies that he had was this idea of management by objectives, which means that he really emphasized that corporations and organizations needed to have a set guideline and set expectations for what their employees needed to do. There was a way to really monitor the metrics of an employee's performance and what objectives they needed to meet to constantly aid the corporation to growing and developing within the modern world. It aided with the productivity issues that were arising due to no set structure and no set guidelines for these employees, both on the employee and leadership positions. It also engaged employees in providing them a feedback on how they were performing and what was expected for them in their designated roles or positions that they held, possibly also lightening the workload, because through this types of set goals and objectives and expectations, roles were very evidently defined and very easily found. These employees no longer had to develop their own expectations and monitoring system. Rather so, there was already some sort of framework to monitor them and to provide them some sort of worth and feedback in how they were performing within the corporation's expectations. I think what's important to note about Peter Drucker is his really well-versed perspective on how societies crumble when there isn't really a set sort of groundwork and structure within how they handle certain situations and organizations of their corporations and businesses. And this can be seen through his different works that he published throughout his tenure. He really has a wide range of experience, from fleeing Vienna and going to England during the reign of Nazi Germany's Adolf Hitler. He also had a large, great deal of knowledge in terms of the Great Depression and the aftermath of that, and how it really shook the country in terms of kind of de-establishing the framework and the set structure that was in place before anything was discussed at the times. It's interesting to note that he really emphasized the idea that he had already seen a society crumble, and he wanted to do so to avoid having that happen again. One of the ideologies that Peter Drucker really focused on was the idea of a customer-centric approach, and this really deals with having the client being their main focal point in terms of the corporation going forward. Although most corporations do put the client forward, or more so first, they do put more of an emphasis on dealing with what their expectations and ever-changing needs are in the everyday day. Clients are constantly fluctuating between different ages and different generations of people, or different peoples in general, that take part in what the corporation is putting out, whether it's through services or through providing products to these clients. I think it also advocates that through these policies and changes that he enforces, he brings about more of a focus on developing the idea that corporations would keep the client in mind in terms of their growth. And this ends up falling into one of the other ideologies that Peter Drucker also talks about. The next type of ideology that Peter Drucker really does focus on is this idea of an ethical corporation in terms of both environment and also to the client itself. And this really does bring about an idea that both corporations should bring about change to the society and bring about a positive contribution to the society. And this really does play on the belief that he believed that he was creating a functioning society through business corporations. Corporations were bringing about policies that would encourage ecologically friendly procedures and policies that might have not been in place in previous times. He also advocates for businesses to become a little bit more conscious on ethical procedures so that they are not only being a ethical corporation, but also being ethically good people. Peter Drucker focuses on this idea of social responsibility, that the corporation itself needs to take needs to realize that their impact on society and environment is vast, that they should operate within certain parameters that would encourage a positive outlook on the environment and on the people itself, so that there isn't a detrimental result due to maybe their set procedures or beliefs, or maybe lack of. Peter Drucker believed in the idea of these social and environmental responsibilities, but also realized that they had to be within their economic goals. So there was this sort of balance between what was expected of society, but also how they managed their economic goals to meet those expectations. So there wasn't some sort of unrealistic mindset on how to handle these certain day-to-day contributions from said corporations. I believe that one of the most important ideologies that Peter Drucker brought about was this idea of innovation and entrepreneurship, and putting an emphasis on all levels of organization to bring about change and innovation. He really brought on the idea that through these new opportunities and new goals they set upon, they would continuously grow within the business world. He believed that all employees of all levels would be able to bring about these changes and innovations, and really put a big emphasis on listening and taking on all these considerations from all these types of different employees in the decision-making process, because they firsthand had the ability to have a different perspective in terms of what was going to be the next big thing within these types of corporations. they might be able to bring about change because they know better than themselves on what they believe is maybe not working due to relying on older practices and avoiding changing up certain structural beliefs and policies that have been set in place because there's been no real big questioning power. And in doing so, Peter Drucker really focuses on this idea of a relationship between leadership roles and their employees. He believed that rather than controlling them, they should empower them and encourage them in their workforces to really continuously grow and expand and learn so that they can positively contribute to the corporation itself, but also to society. They believe that because leaderships has such a pivotal role in aiding their employees, he really emphasizes the positive relationship between these different roles and how if the environment was friendly and a positive work environment between these types of roles, it would create a better productive team in terms of putting out products or ideas or bringing about change that might aid the environment to be a little bit more well-functioning and collaborative. I think because of this focus on the relationship between employees and leadership, there was a better way of managing their employees. There was set metrics set in place to monitor their performance and meet their expectations, and there was feedback given from the leadership positions to their employees so that they could better perform within their given tasks and purviews. I think it's important to note that because there was a set way of monitoring their metrics, it was both beneficial to both the leadership role to monitor their employees, but also the employees to monitor themselves so that they might be able to work on themselves in terms of productivity or being more informed of what was expected of them in their given roles. I think with these established roles and set guidelines on what their positions entailed, I think it better aided them in having well-established working environments for both the employee and the leadership role. One of the beliefs that Peter Drucker imposed on corporations was this idea that what was one of the keys to a growing corporation was knowledgeable workers, and this implied both low-level workers and the high-level workers as well. They both indicated that they needed to grow both within their work fields, but also as people. They needed to experience new perspectives and new mindsets so that they could better bring about change in their corporations from an ever-growing community. I think he emphasizes the role of knowledge being a forerunner in developing these corporations into bigger corporations so that they could be well established within the business world. He brings about this idea through the knowledge factor that because the workers are more knowledgeable, there's the ability of innovation to expand and grow, because the more knowledgeable the workers are, the more innovation that arises from different mindsets and different points of views from all levels of the corporation. It works hand in hand with the idea that through these innovations, the corporation is able to stay afloat and modern within the expectations of society itself. Through this decentralization, I believe that Peter Drucker really believed that it would foster this culture of innovation from all aspects of the corporation, from the lowest person to the highest level. He believed that because corporations required multiple people's inputs, it brought about change in a more effective manner rather than having one set group of people do the decision making. The following person I would like to discuss is Henry Mintzberg, who was born on September 2nd, 1939 in Montreal, Canada. He studied at McGill University for mechanical engineering and then followed suit with his master's and doctorate degree in management. One of the most notable things from Henry Mintzberg was through his managerial role investigation, where he researched multiple managerial roles and was able to identify multiple different types of positions within this specific role that could be broken down into different classifications. So the first ideology that I would like to discuss about was this idea of different types of managerial roles within organizations. These roles were to include figureheads, leadership, liaisons, monitors, disseminators, spokesperson, entrepreneurs, disturbance handlers, resource allocators, and negotiators. These different types of characterizations of leadership positions would be the groundwork in how he develops the different types of styles that would be associated to these different types of positions or roles or tasks that would comprise or make up these types of positions. Essentially, he develops this idea that different managerial styles or different managerial structures would be implemented within corporations to better align themselves with the needs and expectations of the corporations required. Through his research of managerial positions, he found that managerial work is characterized by fragmentation and variety. He argues that there are different roles and tasks that a manager takes on to better aid the corporation and its employees to a more productive working environment for both themselves and the employees as well. He also highlights the important position that a managerial role takes on working within a corporation and how its different styles and structures output different performances within the corporation itself. Mintzberg then delves into this idea of different types of organizations or configurations of these types of organizations that would include simple structure, machine bureaucracy, professional bureaucracy, divisionalized organizations, and autocracy. He emphasizes the importance that with these different types of classifications of organizations that they should better align themselves to what the corporations expected or required in terms of their environment and their strategy. So the first type of structure I'd like to discuss would be autocracy. And this one of its key components is that there's no really formal structure within this type of organization, but that their employees are experts within their varied fields, and there aren't no set standard procedures within these types of organizations, which then come arise the issues of no defined roles and a difficult work environment in terms of decision making. I think one of the beneficial positions of this organization is that it does function with smaller groups of people, but it does have an issue with a management style because there is clashes with different individuals within this organization to come to terms with what they really want to focus on. And there's issues with decision making and collaborative issues as well. The following type of structural organization would be the machine organization, where workers operate as parts of a standardized system. Within this type of organization, each department consists of their own decision making within their own set teams. And through this, there's a standardized work process, but also a centralized decision making where all the sets of departments such as accounting, human resources, marketing, or advertising come together to kind of articulate their decisions. And all these different types of department heads then come together to formulate different types of decisions or discuss different topics within their fields to bring about within the corporation itself. So rather than having one set group of people doing all the work, they're split into different subsections so that one dedicated team is working on what specific objective they're meeting, and then they would inevitably come together at the end to discuss an overall bigger picture for the corporation itself. Because this type of organization is a little bit more formalized, there is a higher degree of clear defined roles and also a higher level of specialized knowledge within these types of roles, within accountants, within human resources, with litigation, within marketing. There is a better sense of expertise within these set departments, indicated by their department heads most often. Is the main person put in charge, whether it's through experience or through tenure, that they have developed their knowledge to be able to articulate their entire department's information that they're being put, that they're processing to put out to the larger masses of the corporation that would deal with decision making and larger issues at hand within a bigger picture of a corporation. So, like a machine organization, a professional organization works similarly to that, but an example of a professional organization would be more so law firms or accounting firms where there is a specialized group of people within the same field working with a standardized objective and standardized roles. Rather than working within corporations as employees, they work as external entities to aid objectives within the corporation itself, but also underlying objectives within the actual entity of the corporation that is functioning through professional organization. I think there is no centralization with these types of professional organizations, and because so, there is a more of a higher feeling of independent work and decision making within this type of corporation due to its separation between working within a internal corporation rather than being independently owned or functioning outside of the set parameters that corporations will place on their employees. There's definitely a high degree of specialization within this field due to them having to work independently from larger teams. Generally speaking, these accountants have large years of experience. They have different types of experience with different types of businesses, and whether it's entrepreneurial or larger corporations or partnerships, they're familiar with different types of laws and are specialized to meet specific people's needs. This type of organization really emphasizes a knowledgeable worker, but specifically with a particular expertise on whatever they are well versed in. So this is really identifiable within accountants and within lawyers who specialize in specific different types of fields that maybe the other type of employee would focus on different types. Whereas in larger corporations or even different types of organizational structures, there is this more of a well-rounded person. I think because of this level of degree of experience, there is a more of a dedicated team to specific issues and objectives that they might face. Rather than having an employee be well versed in a large amount of information, they are more specialized in their specific fields of study, which definitely allows them to be a bit more autonomous compared to their other organizational structures that might exist. One of the more common types of organizations would be entrepreneurial organizations, and these deal with usually smaller corporations or startups that consist of one person being the main figurehead / decision maker. So this would inevitably be a difficult type of organization due to it being so small and having to have one person dedicate their entire time to maintaining their corporation / business and really trying to keep it functioning, as well as maintaining their employees' work environment and positions. I think one of the most difficult things about this type of position is the inability to delegate different types of responsibilities and roles to their subordinates. And this comes more so from the dedication and passion that they might feel within their specific startups or businesses. And it is quite difficult for them to let go of this kind of mindset of not relying too heavily on their employees because of this passion that they feel for their startups. I think there is also a little bit more of independence for the figurehead itself to make the decisions, but it also poses the risk of them not being adaptable to change and taking advice or different perspectives from their employees themselves. I think it also aids in a little bit more of a stronger, well-rounded leadership team because they're well aware of the fact that they are such a small team. So these leadership positions do definitely take a higher level of approach in terms of establishing relationship between the employees and the leadership positions. So they are well versed on what's going on within these types of organizations. One of the benefits of using this type of organization is that the flexibility is a little bit more notable within these types of organizational structures. Because leadership positions have less people to have to manage or less people to have to speak to, there's a little bit more flexibility on what they're allowed to do or allowed to put in place to better manage corporations. The issue does arise where there is a miscommunication or a lack of communication between leadership positions and the main decision maker that owns the corporation or puts out more so the standard policies that they would like to follow along suit for these types of corporations. Although these innovations and experiences from the small group of people they have do function properly when working together collaboratively, there is an issue of poor decision making if the team isn't collaborating as well as it should be. So divisional organization is actually an organization that I'm quite familiar with in my current workforce. I think it's an interesting thing to see now because notably larger corporations with per se larger locations or establishments are harder to manage due to the sheer size of it really doesn't allow for one said person to maintain all that and to look over. So rather than maintaining one person in charge of large subsections of teams or divisions or departments, there is one subset of a division or divisional head slash district manager more so to really oversee all the different locations or departments that fall under the corporation itself. These types of corporations tend to be quite large, and the higher end of the level of hierarchy tend to be the ones that are looking at the bigger picture rather than looking at the day-to-day operations within this corporation. Divisional managers tend to oversee the day-to-day operations by checking in on these types of teams, lending them to lead autonomous lives more so, but always verifying that they are following within the corporation's expectations and policies that have been set in place to maintain an effective work environment. It's also interesting to note that because it's a little bit more decentralized, there is a sense of decentralized authority for the managers that are set in place to manage their day-to-day issues with their specific locations or with their specific teams to better handle those situations rather than to depend on a larger subsection of different teams to maintain their overall day-to-day operations. These divisional managers play a big role in maintaining the overall environment and smaller subsections of corporations that are normally not seen day to day by the bigger corporation figureheads, but rather so maintained to effectively run a corporation with larger subsections of different teams in the everyday market. So this generally tends to be people who have large product assortments. Within my life, I see divisional managers, such as my operational district manager, be in charge of multiple locations, but overall maintain the image and the expectations that the corporation has set in place to constantly verify that these locations are always providing the best types of support within both its consumers and its employees. It's a way to kind of check and be aware of certain issues that might have arisen due to whether it's a specific location issue or an overall issue within the corporation that maybe the higher end of the corporation might not pick up on due to it being more of a day-to-day operations issue rather than a large-scale issue. Mintzberg also puts an emphasis on the idea of flexibility and adaptation within strategy formulations and planning and implementation. Rather than just solely depending on pre-planning stages, he also believes that there are moments where unplanned strategies must be put into place to better adapt to the ever-changing environment that corporations belong to. There is also this idea of the role of leadership, and then rather it being an actual position, Mintzberg puts an emphasis on the idea that it is rather a process than a position itself. The idea that all managerial processes can come from all different facets of the company, whether it's a lower scale employee to a higher end figurehead, it really puts an emphasis on the idea that there is ideas of innovation and changes of policies and standards from different perspectives within the corporation itself. And these ideas that have been brought about by Mintzberg has definitely provided a good framework and foundation for managerial roles and organizational structures within corporations to include strategic management as well, that could be seen both in the past and the present, and constantly being used to keep companies modernized and constantly adaptive to their different working environments, whether it's through consumerism changes or through political changes or ethical changes that come about through environments or social expectations that are required by the society. Now that we've discussed a little bit of their ideologies, both between Peter Drucker and Henry Mintzberg, we could discuss a little bit about their similarities and differences of their beliefs. Some of their difference between their approaches to management has to do with the aspects of management. Peter Drucker believed that there was more of an emphasis on providing clear objectives and set guidelines for their employees, both on the leadership scale and the employees as well. Whereas Mintzberg really focuses on the management side, studying the actual behaviors of managerial roles and the responsibilities and complexity of these roles that play a big part in developing and growing this corporation. Peter Drucker also focuses on the idea that there should be a formal process of planning and strategy, rather than having no set clear boundaries or guidelines. He believes that there should be goal setting and metrics to really follow suit with, so that the employees can rather be made aware of what is expected within the corporation's guidelines. Whereas Mintzberg has more of an emphasis on the idea that although formally strategy and planning should be important and well planned, there should also be this idea that it can be unplanned and well adapted to any experience or expectation that the company might be expected to react to. Although Peter Drucker did discuss the importance of organizational structures within corporations, Mintzberg took full focus on really developing this idea of organizational structures and the different structures that corporations could take to better align them to the needs and expectations of corporations. Rather than having one set sort of organization, there were multiple different sets of organizations that would better suit their needs and expectations to create a more hospitable work environment. Both Peter Drucker and Henry Mintzberg both believed in this idea of a customer-centric approach. They both had the idea that customers were always the focal point for these corporations, and corporations must adapt to meet their expectations and needs to continuously grow within the business market. Something that was similar between both Peter Drucker and Henry Mintzberg was this idea of leadership roles and leadership positions. They both emphasized the importance of these positions because of the developed rapport between employees and leadership positions that would aid in developing a better environment for both the employee and the leadership role. The idea that leadership positions needed to take different styles and approaches in maintaining a good environment, but also encouraging and empowering both their employees and themselves into developing new ideas or new policies to be put in place to really encourage a growth within their corporations. Both Peter Drucker and Henry Mintzberg both believed the importance of knowledge. They both believed that employees in leadership positions both needed to develop and grow as people within their set roles through the idea of learning and continuously growing and adapting to the ever-changing world. Both Drucker and Mintzberg emphasized the importance of the responsibility of businesses held considering the impact of society and the environment. They advocated for ethical practices, social contributions, and the balancing of economic goals with social and environmental responsibilities. Peter Drucker specifically said that his main role in corporations will not so more so to assist with business, but more so to create a functioning society, and this could be seen with multiple of his policies. Although both men focuses on different purviews of business management, they both end up talking about similar ideologies that follow suit with each other, such as customer-centric approaches, the idea that knowledge is always the key to aiding a company in growing or expanding within the workforce, and creating a well-established relationship between their employees and leadership roles to assist corporations in growing and culminating innovations from said employees.